You probably have no idea how deep this conditioning runs. You weren't just taught to be polite. You were programmed to cut away your own power and dress it up as virtue. You were told to romanticize your obedience, to believe that being agreeable was the highest form of goodness. And over time, you learned to act like a domesticated pet, wagging your tail at the faintest sign of disapproval. When she frowned, when her affection cooled, when her gaze went cold, you panicked. You performed. You apologized. You convinced yourself that this was what a good man does. But nature already whispered the truth. The weak are the ones who wrap their fear in moral language. This isn't virtue, it's fear dressed up in a halo. You weren't broken by cruelty. You were broken by your own hunger to be loved. You traded your values for a kiss. You rewrote your soul to seem less threatening, less masculine, less you.
And in the end, she still left, or worse, she stayed and disrespected you. Because you taught her that your manhood could be bought, and all it cost was her withholding warmth. Most men collapse under this dynamic. They call it love, but it's not love, it's survival. They want peace at any cost, even if that peace means losing their own center. And when they're used, discarded, or cheated on, they come back, not from strength, but from addiction. Because when you have no spine, pain becomes the only thing you know how to cling to. But then, she meets him. The man who doesn't break when she pulls away. The man who doesn't drop his standards for her affection. The man who doesn't indulge emotional theater or respond to weaponized silence. The Stoic man. He doesn't need her to feel whole, and that terrifies her. Not because he's dangerous, but because he's immune. He can't be programmed. He's not dependent. He's not starving for her attention. He doesn't orbit her moods like a dog trained to fetch. She's confronted by something ancient, a man outside the psychological matrix she's been taught to control. Nietzsche once said, "The higher man is distinguished from the lower by his fearlessness in facing the abyss." The Stoic man has faced it. He's stared into the void of abandonment and didn't beg. He's endured silence without collapsing. He's been unloved and didn't lose himself in the mirror. Loss forged him. It didn't destroy him. He doesn't fear walking away because he's walked alone before and found strength, not sorrow. His solitude isn't a prison, it's a fortress. He refuses disrespect because he refuses to tolerate the version of himself who once did. He will not beg, he will not chase, he will not plead for the attention of someone who uses love as a leash. He's not a servant to her validation. He is the sovereign of his own soul. That's what makes her tremble. Because most men, you can crack them with the simplest moves. Withhold warmth, they whimper. Raise your voice, they shrink. Threaten to leave, they promise to change. But this man, he does nothing. He just watches. And in that stillness, her entire script falls apart. The lines she rehearsed no longer land. The emotional buttons she's always pushed don't return a signal. Because this man isn't plugged into her system anymore, he sees the game and refuses to play. Here's what modern culture will never tell you. The average man is not respected. He's managed. He exists in a gray space between utility and obedience, useful when compliant, praised when submissive, replaced the moment he questions the system. And yet, he keeps serving. Why? Because he's been trained to seek affection like oxygen, to mistake validation for proof of existence. Nature warned us, he who does not have the strength to be alone will always be a slave. Most men today are slaves, and they call it love. They hand over their vision, their principles, their time, and their voice in hopes of buying peace. And for a while, it seems to work. She smiles, she softens, she opens up. But it's a velvet trap. Because behind that affection is an unspoken contract. Stay predictable, stay pleasing, stay pliable. The moment you assert something she doesn't like, that contract gets revoked. And most men, terrified of emotional exile, fall back in line. But the Stoic man, he isn't afraid of exile. He's already been there. And he's learned it's far better to be alone in truth than adored in self-betrayal.
He will not shrink to keep her comfortable. He will not lie to win her praise. He will not dilute himself just to be allowed close. He's not trying to be accepted. He's trying to remain intact. And that, more than any wealth, charm, or strength, is what unsettles her the most. Because it means she has no control. She can't dictate the tempo of the relationship with silence. She can't summon his attention by withholding her body. She can't bend his frame with guilt or emotional spectacle. For the first time, she's face to face with a man who sees her clearly and remains unmoved. Nietzsche once wrote, "The most perfidious way of harming a cause consists of defending it deliberately with faulty arguments." In the context of modern masculinity, the cause is your strength. The faulty arguments? That strength is cruelty. That boundaries are abuse. That stoicism is emotional repression. These are lies designed to keep you dependent. Because a man who doesn't need to be approved of is a man who can't be controlled. The Stoic man has dismantled those lies within himself. He knows peace without power is just submission. That compassion without clarity is weakness. That love without respect is slow suicide.
And because he knows this, he doesn't play emotional games. He doesn't argue with irrationality. He doesn't explain his silence. He doesn't validate behavior that violates his soul. He simply withdraws, quietly, finally. And in doing so, he triggers a panic most women have never experienced. The panic of losing access to a man who doesn't need you. Because make no mistake, most modern relationships are not built on mutual respect. They're built on emotional leverage. And the Stoic man, just by being himself, shatters that economy. She's used to winning by default. But now, she has to earn him. Not with beauty, not with tears, not with temporary compliance. With truth. And very few can give that. She's used to being pursued, admired on arrival, handed a crown before she's spoken a word. She's accustomed to men who fold before they're even asked. Men who offer loyalty without testing her character. Men who trade their standards for a smile. But the Stoic man, he doesn't offer the throne. He doesn't praise what he doesn't respect. And she feels it, deep. It destabilizes her. Because he's not looking for someone to save. He's looking for someone who's already saved herself.
Nietzsche described it perfectly. What is done out of love always takes place beyond good and evil.
The Stoic man loves, but not with society's conditions and not by the rules she was taught to expect. He loves without submission, without distortion, without sacrificing himself. And that kind of love is more dangerous than rejection, because it demands she rise to meet it. Most men lower themselves to gain trust, but the Stoic man stays high and invites her to climb. That's why she shakes, because most men crave access, but this man doesn't crave. He guards. He guards his time. He guards his values. He guards his direction. And above all, he guards his emotional world, not with fear, but with reverence. His emotions are earned, not extracted. His intimacy is a privilege, not a prize for persistence. He's not emotionally distant, he's emotionally disciplined. And that is a form of masculinity she's never encountered before. It doesn't beg, it doesn't perform. It simply exists with weight. And it expects her to either rise or leave.
Nietzsche once said, "You have your way, I have my way. As for the right way, the correct way, and the only way, it does not exist." That's how the Stoic man lives. Not perfect, not pretending, just true. And because he's true, he can't be bought, not with beauty, not with compliments, not with promises laced with manipulation. He sees the truth she tries to hide. He sees the need for control disguised as vulnerability, the tests disguised as affection, the chaos disguised as passion. And he calls it out, not with words, but with refusal. He doesn't engage it. He doesn't reward it. He doesn't bend. Because he's not here to soothe her nervous system. He's here to protect his own. This is what sets him apart. While other men calibrate themselves to her approval, he calibrates himself to his mission. And she realizes, often without words, that she is not the center of his universe. His purpose is. If she can't align with that, she will be left behind. Not with cruelty, but with precision. This is the earthquake. Not his anger, not his dominance, but his consistency, his unshakable identity, his refusal to flinch under pressure. She throws everything at him: withdrawal, drama, silence, seduction, and still he doesn't move. Because he's already decided what kind of man he will be. And no woman, no matter how beautiful, no matter how magnetic, will rewrite that definition. That's what shakes her. Not because he's cruel, but because he's complete. The most terrifying mirror a woman can face isn't made of glass. It's a man who sees her clearly and doesn't flinch. Because in his presence, every fantasy she was taught to believe, every social cue she learned to exploit, every move that once worked on dozens of men, dies. The manipulation fails, the performance collapses, the mask slips, and for the first time, she's left with an unbearable question. What do I offer a man who cannot be seduced? She expected to be worshipped for her beauty, but he isn't interested in beauty unless it's matched by behavior. She expected him to chase, but he doesn't chase what doesn't move toward him with grace. She expected to be the gravity in the relationship, but she realizes he orbits nothing but his own truth. Nietzsche said, "The individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. If you try it, you will often be lonely, but no price is too high to pay for the privilege of owning yourself." That's exactly what she feels now, the presence of a man who owns himself. She has no power over him, not because he's closed, but because he's sordid. He doesn't need her to affirm who he is. His masculinity doesn't wobble under her disapproval. He can love her fully, but he will never beg to be loved back. He will never barter his identity for her affection. And in that posture, he becomes something most women have never experienced: a man who is emotionally present, yet psychologically untouchable. This forces her to confront herself. Can she meet his standard without games? Can she stand in her truth without tactics? Can she give without trying to govern? Most can't, because most have never had to. They've been surrounded by men who collapse under pressure, men who confuse affection with self-erasure, men who trade their crown for comfort. But this man, the Stoic man, does not trade. He offers. And if his offer isn't respected, he retracts it. No explanation, no negotiation, no drama. He doesn't threaten. He just vanishes and leaves her with her untested self. Nietzsche warned that the greatest danger isn't pain, but comfort, the kind that numbs you to your own mediocrity. The Stoic man brings no such comfort. He brings pressure, not by shouting, not by dominance, but by existing at a level of emotional clarity that exposes every falsehood around him.
She feels it. The quiet pressure of being near someone who doesn't need her to feel powerful, who doesn't ask permission to stand tall, who won't flatter her fears or inflate her ego just to keep her around. This man is a reckoning, a philosophical confrontation, a walking storm of honesty that says, become who you truly are, or leave. No ultimatums, no traps. Just an unshakable frame that the world either aligns with or breaks against. The Stoic man doesn't change the rules, he reveals them. He shows that most love isn't love at all. It's power disguised as affection. Most relationships aren't built on truth, they're built on silent threats. If you don't make me feel what I want, I will withdraw. That's the real contract most men sign, and they sign it with their pride as payment. But the Stoic man burns that contract on sight. He doesn't accept love that comes with a leash. He doesn't bow to moods or barter with respect. He's chosen something higher than approval. He's chosen himself. And that choice is the beginning of real power. Because you cannot call yourself free if your peace can be bought with someone's approval. You cannot call yourself strong if your standards collapse under silence. You cannot call yourself a man if you have to be emotionally supervised. The Stoic man has seen it all. Tears used as tools, affection dangled as bait, sex weaponized, silence rehearsed to provoke a reaction. And none of it works anymore because he sees the mask.
Nietzsche wrote, "He who fights with monsters should see to it that he does not become a monster. And if you gaze long into an abyss, the abyss also gazes into you." The Stoic man has looked into that abyss, the black hole of emotional dependence. He's confronted the version of himself who once begged, once twisted, once bled for love that wasn't love at all. And he killed that version. Not with hate, not with bitterness, but with evolution. So now, when she's angry, he doesn't flinch. When she's distant, he doesn't panic. When she throws a tantrum, he doesn't dance. He simply remains. Not cold, not cruel, just centered. And that presence, that unshakable presence, tells her without words, "I'm not here for your chaos. I'm here for truth. Match it, or I walk." She's no longer the gravity in the room, no longer the prize, no longer the puppet master pulling strings of guilt and desire. She's just another soul standing before him, and for the first time, her tricks don't work. Now she has two choices: rise or retreat. And that's why Stoic men are feared, not because they are cruel, but because they leave no room for half-truths. They demand transformation, or they demand departure. There is no middle ground.